The first time I saw my divorce settlement check, I cried. Not because $25,000 was life-changing money. It wasn't, but because it meant I was finally free. My name is Veronica, and I just escaped 6 years of marriage to a man who never laid a hand on me, but somehow managed to crush my soul anyway. Adrian had this gift for making me feel like I was drowning in shallow water. He'd criticize my cooking while eating every bite. He'd tell me I looked tired when I wore makeup, then ask if I was sick when I didn't. Death by 1,000 paper cuts, except the cuts were words and the paper was my self-worth. You sure you want to do this? My lawyer asked as I signed the final papers. $25,000 isn't much for 6 years of marriage. It's enough, I said, and I meant it. Adrian could keep his precious house, his BMW, his collection of vintage watches. I just wanted out. The check felt warm in my hands as I walked to my car. For the first time in years, I had a plan that was entirely mine. Therapy, real therapy, not the couple's counseling where Adrian spent 50 minutes explaining why everything was my fault. A small apartment somewhere quiet, maybe even a cat. Simple dreams, but they were mine. I drove straight to my parents' house, practically floating. Mom was in the kitchen making her famous lasagna, the one she only made for celebrations. "How did it go, sweetheart?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "It's done," I said, pulling out the check. "I'm officially divorced." She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "We're so proud of you, Veronica. It takes courage to start over." Dad looked up from his newspaper. 25,000. That's something at least. "It's everything," I said. "I'm thinking I'll find a therapist first, then look for an apartment, maybe something near the Lake District." "I've always loved it there." Mom nodded enthusiastically. "That sounds perfect. You deserve peace." For 3 days, I felt like I could breathe again. I researched therapists, bookmarked apartment listings, even bought a houseplant, a small succulent that the lady at the nursery promised was impossible to kill. I named him Hope. Then Camilla called. "Hey, sis," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Mom told me about your settlement." "That's so exciting." My older sister had perfected the art of sounding supportive while somehow making you feel small. She lived in a perfect suburban house with her perfect husband Xander, posting perfect photos of their perfect life on Instagram every day. "Thanks," I said cautiously. "I'm pretty excited about it too." "Well, I have some news that might make you even happier. You know how Xander and I have been saving for that kitchen renovation? The one I've been talking about for months?" I didn't remember her talking about any kitchen renovation, but I made a noncommittal sound. Mom had the most wonderful idea. She said family should help family, and since you don't really have any concrete plans for that money yet. My blood turned to ice. "What are you saying?" "She used your settlement to pay for our renovation. Isn't that amazing? Now you'll always be part of our home. Every time I cook in that beautiful new kitchen, I'll think of you." The phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. I stared at it, her tinny voice still chattering about marble countertops and custom cabinets. I called Mom immediately. "Oh, honey," she said when I confronted her. "I was going to tell you. Camilla needed the help, and you said yourself you didn't have solid plans. This way, the money stays in the family." That was my money, my divorce settlement, my fresh start. "Don't be dramatic. You can stay here as long as you need. Family takes care of family. I'm 32 years old. I don't want to live with my parents." "Well, maybe if you'd made better choices, you wouldn't need to." I hung up and sat in my car for an hour, shaking. The succulent sat on my passenger seat, already looking wilted despite the nursery lady's promises. That evening, my phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. Camila had posted a photo of her gleaming new kitchen, white marble, stainless steel appliances, a massive island that probably cost more than most people's cars. The caption read, "Dreams do come true. So grateful for family who believe in us." Justice for the oldest daughters. Blessed Sarkir Kitchen Goals. Family first. I stared at that post until my eyes burned. Justice for the oldest daughters. Like she was some kind of victim who'd finally gotten what she deserved. Like my pain was her prize. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. But for the first time in years, it wasn't from fear. It was from fury. I showed up at my parents' house the next morning without calling first. Mom was watering her prized roses, humming some old song like she didn't have a care in the world. Veronica, what a nice surprise. Are you serious? I cut her off. Are you actually serious right now? She set down her watering can, that familiar look of wounded innocence spreading across her face. I don't know what you mean. My divorce money, $25,000, gone, to pay for Camila's kitchen. Oh, honey, you're being so dramatic. I was helping the family. Camila and Xander have been struggling with that renovation for months, and you said yourself you didn't have concrete plans. I had plans. I told you my plans. Therapy. An apartment. A life. Dad appeared in the doorway, coffee mug in hand. What's all the shouting about? Your wife stole my divorce settlement. I didn't steal anything, Mom snapped. I made a family decision. That money is better invested in Camila's home than wasted on some overpriced apartment you'll probably hate in 6 months. Dad sipped his coffee slowly. You didn't have a plan anyway, Veronica. At least this way, the money's not thrown away. Thrown away? On my mental health? On my independence? Independence is overrated, he said. Family is what matters. Your mother did what she thought was best. I stared at them both. These people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. So that's it? My money is just gone, and I'm supposed to be grateful. You should be grateful, Mom said. Camila's kitchen will increase the value of their home. It's an investment, and now you'll always be part of it. I don't want to be part of Camila's kitchen. I want my own life. Well, maybe you should have thought about that before you married Adrian, Dad said. The words hit like a slap. I turned and walked away before I said something I couldn't take back. Sunday brunch at Camila's was a family tradition I'd been dreading all week. But I went anyway, because apparently I'm a glutton for punishment. The new kitchen was even more stunning in person. Gleaming white marble, professional-grade appliances, a massive island that could seat 8 people. It probably cost $40,000. Easy. Veronica! Camila rushed over and hugged me like we were best friends. Isn't it gorgeous? I can't believe it's finally done. It's beautiful, I managed. Xander appeared with mimosas. Your sister's been raving about this kitchen for months. We never could have afforded it without family help. Oh, speaking of which, Camila announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, I have to thank my amazing little sister. Veronica, you are so generous, using your divorce settlement to help us with this renovation. I mean, who does that? You're literally an angel. Everyone turned to look at me. Cousins, aunts, uncles, all smiling and nodding like I'd just donated a kidney. So generous of you, Ver, Uncle Mike said, raising his mimosa. That's what family does, Aunt Sarah added. I felt like I was drowning again, just like with Adrian. Except this time, the water was praised for something I never agreed to do. I need some air, I said, stepping onto the back patio. Brooke followed me out. My cousin was the only person in this family who'd ever really gotten me. You okay? She asked. Do I look okay? You look like you want to burn this place down. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. They took my divorce money, Brooke. All of it. And now they're acting like I'm some kind of saint for letting them. Wait, what? They took your settlement? Mom said it was a family decision. Dad said I didn't have a plan anyway. And Camila just thanked me in front of everyone like I chose this. Brooke's eyes went wide. That's insane. That was your money, your fresh start. Apparently fresh starts are overrated. Family investments are what matter. This is so messed up. She was quiet for a moment. You know what's weird, though? I remember when we were kids, your dad set up some kind of trust thing, something about protecting family assets. I looked at her sharply. What trust? I don't know the details. I just remember my mom mentioning it once. Said your dad was always paranoid about losing the house or something. He put everything in some complicated legal structure. When was this? Years ago. You were maybe 15? 16? I only remember because my mom was annoyed that Uncle Eli didn't trust her enough to tell her the details. My heart started beating faster. That trust. Do you know if it was ever dissolved? No idea. Why? I stared through the sliding glass door at Camila's perfect kitchen, at my family laughing and eating and celebrating with my money. Just curious, I said. But I wasn't curious. I was calculating. That evening, I dug through boxes in my childhood bedroom until I found them. Old legal binders my dad had kept from when I was a teenager. Most of it was boring financial stuff, but buried in the back was a folder labeled Family Trust v. Wise. My hands shook as I opened it. There it was, a trust established in my name when I was 16, designed to protect family assets, and according to the paperwork, it was never dissolved. I called Brooke immediately. That trust you mentioned, it was never dissolved. So, I smiled for the first time in weeks. So that's very interesting. Faith Fowler's law office smelled like leather and expensive coffee. I'd found her online, a real estate attorney with stellar reviews and a no-nonsense headshot that suggested she didn't suffer fools. So, she said, spreading the trust documents across her mahogany desk. You found these in your childhood bedroom? My dad's a pack rat. Never throws anything away. She adjusted her reading glasses and studied the papers. This is fascinating. Your father established this trust when you were 16, naming you as the primary beneficiary and eventual trustee. What does that mean exactly? It means he was protecting family assets by putting them in your name. Smart move, actually. If he ever faced bankruptcy or lawsuits, creditors couldn't touch anything in the trust. My palms were sweating. And it was never dissolved? Not according to these documents. In fact, she flipped to another page. It looks like when your sister and her husband purchased their home, they used collateral that was originally placed in this trust. What kind of collateral? Investment accounts, property deeds, assets your father transferred into your name for protection. When Camilla needed backing for her mortgage, he used those assets as collateral, but he never properly transferred them out of your trust first. I leaned forward. So what does that mean? Faith smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. It means you have a legal interest in that house. Not ownership exactly, but significant leverage. As the trustee, you have management power over the collateral that's backing their mortgage. How much leverage? Well, let's just say if you wanted to call in that collateral, it could force a sale of the property to satisfy the trust obligations. My heart was pounding. Could I actually do that? Legally? Yes. Should you? That's a different question entirely. She leaned back in her chair. What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here, Veronica? They stole my divorce settlement. $25,000. Used it to renovate that kitchen without asking me. And you want revenge. I want justice. Sometimes they're the same thing. Faith gathered the papers. I'll need a few days to research the exact legal standing, but preliminary assessment. You've got options. I left her office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. For the first time since the divorce, I felt like I had some control. That evening, Camilla posted another Instagram story. A time-lapse video of her making dinner in the new kitchen, complete with dramatic music and slow-motion shots of her chopping vegetables on the marble island. The caption read, "Cooking with love in my dream kitchen. Sometimes the best things are worth waiting for. Blessed, her kitchen life. Worth it." I screenshotted it and sent it to Brooke with a message. She has no idea what's coming. Brooke called immediately. What's coming? What did you find out? Let's just say Dad's paranoia about protecting assets might have backfired spectacularly. Veronica, you're scaring me a little. Good, I've been scared for weeks. It's someone else's turn. 3 days later, Faith called with an update. I've got good news and better news, she said. The good news is that trust is absolutely still valid, and you are definitely the legal trustee. The better news is that the collateral backing your sister's mortgage is worth significantly more than the original loan amount. How much more? About $200,000 more. The real estate market has been very kind to your family's investments. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. 200,000? Give or take. Now, here's where it gets interesting. As trustee, you have the right to call for an accounting of how trust assets are being used. And if you determine they're being mismanaged, I can reclaim them. Exactly, which would require your sister and her husband to either buy out your interest or sell the house to satisfy the trust obligations. What would that cost them? Conservatively, about half the current value of their home, maybe $300,000. I was quiet for a long moment. Veronica, you still there? I'm here. Just processing. Look, I have to ask, are you sure you want to go down this road? Family law can get very ugly very quickly. They made it ugly when they stole my money and then made me thank them for it. Fair enough. What's your next move? I looked at my phone, where Camilla had just posted another kitchen photo. This time she was showing off a new $10,000 marble backsplash. I think it's time for a family gathering. What kind of gathering? The kind where I bring gifts. Faith was quiet for a moment. What kind of gifts? Legal documents. Veronica, don't worry. I'm not going to destroy them. I'm just going to level the playing field. And if they fight back? I smiled, remembering Dad's words about not having a plan. Then they'll find out I learned more from him than they thought. The official documents arrived by courier 2 days later. Trust agreements, asset valuations, legal notifications, everything I needed to prove that Camilla's perfect kitchen was built on a foundation that belonged to me. I held the manila envelope in my hands, feeling its weight. It's still in my name. I whispered to my wilted succulent, after all these years, it's still in my name. For the first time since my divorce, I felt powerful. And I was just getting started. The therapist's office had soft lighting and too many throw pillows. But Dr. Martinez didn't sugarcoat anything. You're angry, she said during our first session. Brilliant observation. And you have every right to be. But what are you going to do with that anger? I'd been asking myself the same question for days. The legal documents sat in my car like a loaded weapon, but I hadn't decided when to use them. I don't know yet. Well, while you're figuring it out, let's work on rebuilding your sense of self. When's the last time you did something just for you? I started small. Morning walks around the lake. A new haircut. Shorter, sharper, nothing like the long style Adrian preferred. I bought books I actually wanted to read instead of the ones that looked good on coffee tables. My phone buzzed constantly with family updates I didn't ask for. Mom sending photos of Camilla's latest kitchen additions. Dad forwarding articles about smart financial planning. Camilla herself posting daily kitchen content like she was running a lifestyle blog. I ignored most of it, but I saved every screenshot. You're documenting, Brooke observed when I showed her my phone gallery over coffee. I'm keeping records. Of what? Evidence. Every post about how grateful she is. Every comment about family generosity. Every dollar they're spending. Brooke stirred her latte nervously. Veronica, you're starting to sound a little what? Obsessive. Or thorough. There's a difference? I showed her Camilla's latest post. A professional photo shoot in the kitchen, complete with stage props and perfect lighting. She hired a photographer, Brooke, for her kitchen. My kitchen, technically. Your kitchen? The one paid for with my money, backed by assets in my name. I put my phone away. She's having a housewarming party next weekend. Big celebration. Bring friends, she said. Are you going? Oh, I'm definitely going. Should I be worried? I smiled. Probably. That afternoon, Camilla called me directly. Hey, sis, I'm so excited about the party. You're coming, right? Wouldn't miss it. Great. And feel free to bring someone if you want. I know things have been tough since the divorce, but this could be a fresh start for all of us. A fresh start. I like that. I've been thinking about what you've been going through, and I just want you to know how much it means to me that you helped make this possible. Not everyone would be so selfless. Not everyone would have the opportunity. Exactly. You're such a good sister. I can't wait for you to see the final result. We added crown molding and these gorgeous pendant lights over the island. It's like something out of a magazine. I'm sure it is. Oh, and Veronica, I got you something special. A little thank you gift for everything you've done. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. Family takes care of family, right? After I hung up, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, just breathing. Then I called Faith. I want to move forward, I said. With what exactly? All of it. The trust documentation, the asset evaluation, everything. Veronica, once we serve those papers, there's no going back. Your family will know exactly what you're doing. Good. I'm tired of being the only one who doesn't know what's happening to my own life. When do you want to do this? At the housewarming party. Faith was quiet for a moment. That's dramatic. They made it dramatic when they stole my money and threw a party to celebrate. Fair enough. I'll prepare the documentation. That evening, I was walking around the lake when my phone rang. Dad's name appeared on the screen. Veronica, your mother and I want to talk. About what? About this attitude you've been carrying around. It's not healthy. What attitude? This victim mentality. Camila told us you sounded strange on the phone today. I stopped walking. Strange how? Cold. Distant. She's worried about you. She's worried about me. We all are. Look, I know the divorce was hard, but you can't take it out on the family. We're the ones who've been here for you. By stealing my divorce settlement? By making sure that money wasn't wasted. You should be thanking us, not sulking. I looked out at the lake, watching the sunset paint the water gold. You know what, Dad? You're right. I am. Absolutely. I should be thanking you. Well, good. I'm glad you're finally seeing reason. Oh, I'm seeing everything very clearly now. Good. So you'll come to Camilla's party with the better attitude? I'll come with exactly the attitude the situation deserves. That's my girl. Family first. Always. Always, I agreed. After I hung up, I called Faith back. Change of plans, I said. What kind of change? I want to make sure everyone understands exactly what's happening. No confusion, no misunderstandings. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time they learned that family loyalty works both ways. And if they don't take it well? I smiled, remembering something from childhood, a time when Dad caught me reading his business papers and told me I was too smart for my own good. Then they'll find out I've been paying attention all these years. Let's see how they like consequences, I said out loud after ending the call. The words felt good in my mouth, like a promise I was finally ready to keep. The party was in full swing when I arrived. Camilla had gone all out, string lights in the backyard, a catered spread, and what looked like half the neighborhood admiring her kitchen. Veronica! She rushed over with a champagne flute, looking radiant in a designer dress I definitely couldn't afford. You made it! Come see everything. She dragged me through the house like I was a VIP guest, instead of the person who'd unknowingly funded the whole renovation. People complimented the crown molding, the pendant lights, the marble backsplash that cost more than most people's cars. "Isn't it gorgeous?" Camilla gushed to a group of neighbors. "We've been planning this for years." "It's stunning," said a woman with perfectly blown-out hair. "You're so lucky to have family support." "Not everyone is blessed with such generous relatives." Camilla beamed and squeezed my arm. "Veronica here made it all possible. She's the most selfless person I know." I smiled and sipped my champagne. "Just happy to help." Mom appeared with a plate of appetizers. "There's my generous daughter. Isn't this kitchen everything we dreamed it would be?" "It's definitely something," I said. Xander clinked his glass with a fork, calling for attention. The crowd gathered in the kitchen, everyone holding drinks and smiling expectantly. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he began. "This kitchen represents more than just a renovation. It represents family, love, and the power of supporting each other through thick and thin." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "I especially want to thank my sister-in-law, Veronica." He raised his glass toward me. "Your generosity made this dream possible." "Not many people would use their divorce settlement to help family, but that's the kind of person you are." Everyone turned to look at me, their faces glowing with admiration and champagne. I felt like I was watching a play about my own life, except I'd never auditioned for the role they'd written for me. "To Veronica," Xander declared, "the most generous sister anyone could ask for." "To Veronica," the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. I raised mine too, smiling graciously. "Thank you all so much. Really." Camilla draped her arm around my shoulders, pulling me close for what I'm sure was an Instagram-worthy photo. "This woman right here is the reason we could afford to redo all this. She literally gave us her entire divorce settlement because she knew how much this meant to us." "That's incredible," someone said. "What a sacrifice," added another. "Family first," Dad said proudly from the corner. I gently extracted myself from Camilla's embrace and walked to the center of the kitchen island, the $10,000 marble centerpiece that had been purchased with my freedom money. "You know what?" I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. "I do have something I'd like to share." The crowd quieted, expecting another gracious speech about family love. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope, placing it carefully on the marble surface. "My turn to give a gift." Camilla's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, Veronica, you didn't need to bring anything." "I wanted to." I slid the envelope toward her. "Go ahead, open it." She picked it up hesitantly, her manicured fingers fumbling with the seal. The room was completely silent now, everyone watching with curious anticipation. Camilla pulled out the first document and began reading aloud. "Trust agreement. Asset valuation. Legal notice of—" Her voice trailed off as her eyes scanned the page. "What is it, honey?" Xander asked, moving closer. Camilla's face had gone pale. She flipped through more pages, her hands starting to shake. "Veronica," she said quietly, "what is this?" The room was so quiet I could hear the ice maker and the new refrigerator cycling. I smiled, the same gracious smile I'd been wearing all evening. "Ownership." "Ownership of what?" Mom demanded, pushing through the crowd. "Of the collateral backing this house, of the trust that was established in my name when I was 16 and never dissolved, of the assets that were used to secure the mortgage on this beautiful home." Xander grabbed the papers from Camilla's hands, his eyes scanning frantically. "This is impossible." "Actually, it's very possible. Dad set up a family trust to protect assets from creditors. Smart move, really. Except he forgot to transfer those assets out of my name when you needed collateral for your mortgage." Dad pushed forward, his face red. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the trust you established, Dad. The one you used to protect the family investments. The one that's still in my name. The one that's backing about 60% of Camilla and Xander's mortgage. That's not possible, Mom said. Faith Fowler, real estate attorney, says otherwise. She's very thorough. The crowd was shifting uncomfortably now, sensing the family drama unfolding in front of them. Camilla's voice was barely a whisper. Veronica, what does this mean? I looked around the beautiful kitchen, the crown molding, the pendant lights, the marble island where my legal documents now sat like a centerpiece. It means this kitchen was built with my money, on property I have legal interest in, using assets held in trust under my name. I paused, letting that sink in. It means I'm not the generous sister who gave you her divorce settlement. Then what are you? Xander asked, his voice tight. I smiled one more time, but this smile was different, sharper, more honest. I'm the sister who owns a piece of your house. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before all hell broke loose. This is insane, Camilla shrieked, waving the papers in the air. You can't just show up and claim you own our house. I'm not claiming I own your house, I said calmly. I'm explaining that I have legal interest in the collateral backing your mortgage. There's a difference. Xander was frantically reading through the documents. This has to be fake, some kind of scam. Faith Fowler's contact information is right there on the letterhead. Feel free to call her. Mom pushed through the crowd of increasingly uncomfortable party guests. Veronica, what is wrong with you? How could you do this to your own family? Do what? Discover that Dad used assets in my name without telling me? Or find out that my divorce settlement was stolen to pay for renovations on a house I technically have a stake in? We didn't steal anything, Dad's voice boomed across the kitchen. That money was better invested in family property than wasted on your ridiculous apartment dreams. Ridiculous apartment dreams, I repeated. You mean my desire to have my own life? Several party guests started edging toward the door. A few were openly staring, phones probably recording everything. Everyone needs to leave, Camilla announced, her voice shaking. Family emergency. Thank you for coming. No, please stay, I said pleasantly. This is educational. You're witnessing what happens when family loyalty only flows in one direction. Veronica, stop, Mom hissed. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm embarrassing myself? I'm not the one who stole $25,000 and then threw a party to celebrate. Xander slammed the papers down on the marble island. This is blackmail. Actually, it's real estate law, but I can see how you'd confuse the two. What do you want? Camilla demanded, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. Money? Is that what this is about? It was never about money, Camilla. It was about respect, about asking before you take, about not making me thank you for robbing me blind. We didn't rob you. Then what would you call taking someone's divorce settlement without permission and using it to fund your kitchen renovation? We call it family helping family, Dad said coldly. Funny how that help only seems to flow toward Camilla. The remaining guests were filing out now, murmuring among themselves. I caught fragments of conversation. Family drama. Legal documents. That poor woman. Mom waited until the last guest left before turning on me. Are you happy now? You've ruined Camilla's party. You've humiliated the entire family. I've told the truth. If that's humiliating, maybe you should examine why. The truth? Xander laughed bitterly. The truth is, you're a bitter divorced woman who can't stand to see her sister happy. The truth is, I'm a woman who discovered her family has been financially manipulating her for years. Manipulating? Mom's voice rose to a near shriek. We've been supporting you, housing you, helping you. By stealing my money and gaslighting me into being grateful for it? Camilla collapsed into one of her new bar stools, sobbing. I can't believe you're doing this. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Camilla, besides spend my divorce settlement on marble countertops? We've been there for you. We've supported you through your divorce. You've been there to take my money. That's not the same thing. Dad stepped forward, his face granite hard. What do you want, Veronica? What's your end game here? I want what was stolen from me, with interest. How much interest? Xander asked quietly. $50,000. Twice what you took. 50,000, Camilla gasped. We don't have $50,000. Then you shouldn't have spent 25,000 that wasn't yours. This is extortion, Xander said. This is consequences. You used my money to increase the value of a property I have legal interest in. I'm simply requesting fair compensation. And if we refuse? Dad asked. I gestured to the documents scattered across the marble island. Then Faith and I will explore other options. Did you know that as trustee, I can force an accounting of all trust assets, including a potential sale to satisfy trust obligations? The color drained from Xander's face. You wouldn't. Try me. You can't sell our house, Camilla wailed. I don't want to sell your house. I just want to be compensated for my involuntary contribution to it. Mom was shaking with rage. This is not how we raised you. No, you raised me to be a doormat. To smile and say thank you while you walked all over me, but I'm done with that now. If you do this, Camilla said through her tears, you're not family anymore. I looked around the kitchen one last time, at the crown molding, the pendant lights, the $10,000 marble island, all of it paid for with my freedom money. You know what, Camilla? I think I'm okay with that. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the ice maker seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Dad spoke. You have 48 hours to reconsider this. No, I said, gathering up the legal documents. You have 48 hours to wire $50,000 to the account Faith will provide. After that, we explore more creative solutions. I walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, and Camila, thanks for the party. It was very illuminating. I left them standing in their beautiful, expensive kitchen, surrounded by the ruins of their perfect evening. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The 48 hours passed in complete radio silence. No calls, no texts, no passive-aggressive emails from Mom. It was like I'd been erased from the family group chat of life. On the third morning, my phone buzzed with a bank notification. $50,000 had been wired to my account. I screenshotted it and sent it to Brooke with a message. Christmas came early. She called immediately. Holy shit, they actually paid? Every penny. How do you feel? I stared at my bank balance, trying to identify the emotion. Vindicated and a little sad. Sad? I never wanted it to come to this. I just wanted them to acknowledge what they did was wrong. And instead, they paid you to go away. Pretty much. That afternoon, Dad showed up at my apartment unannounced. I almost didn't answer the door, but curiosity won. He stood in my doorway looking older than I remembered, his usually perfect posture slightly stooped. Can I come in? I stepped aside without speaking. He looked around my small living space, the second-hand furniture, the single succulent on the windowsill, the stack of therapy books on my coffee table. This is what you wanted? This tiny apartment? This is what I could afford after you gave my money away. He sat down heavily on my couch. Your mother is devastated. She should be. She stole from her own daughter. She was trying to help the family. She was trying to help Camila. There's a difference. We sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. Finally, he spoke again. You know, when you were little, you used to follow me around asking questions about everything. Business, investments, legal documents. Your mother said you were too curious for your own good. Turns out she was right. I always knew you were smart. Smarter than Camilla, if I'm being honest. But Camilla needed more help, more support. She was never as capable as you. So you decided I didn't deserve help because I was capable of helping myself? I decided you were strong enough to handle disappointment. Camila isn't. And look how that turned out. She's 34 years old and still can't handle her own problems without stealing from family members. Dad was quiet for a long moment. You play chess, Veronica. I taught you that. You taught me a lot of things, including how to read legal documents. I'm proud of you, he said quietly, and I'm ashamed of myself. I looked at him sharply. Dad never admitted fault about anything. The trust was my idea, he continued. I set it up to protect our assets, and I forgot to properly transfer them when Camila needed collateral. That's on me, not you. But taking my divorce money was Mom's idea. That was both of us. We thought you'd get over it, move on, find another way. Find another way to what? Heal from 6 years of emotional abuse? Build a new life? We thought family was more important than individual needs. A family is supposed to support individual needs, not sacrifice them. He nodded slowly. I see that now. Do you? Or are you just here because I cost you $50,000? I'm here because I realized I raised a daughter who's stronger and smarter than I ever gave her credit for, and I'm sorry it took a legal battle for me to see it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I glanced at it and felt my stomach drop. What is it? Dad asked. I showed him the message. Hope you're happy. We're selling the house. Camila. They're selling? Apparently. I scrolled through my social media and found what I was looking for. Look. Camila had posted a photo of a realtor sign in front of her house. The caption read, "Sometimes life forces you to make difficult choices. Grateful for the memories we made here. New beginnings. Family first. Moving on." She's making it sound like a positive choice, Dad observed. Of course she is. Camila never admits defeat. Are you going to comment? I stared at the post, at the dozens of supportive comments from friends who had no idea what really happened. No, let her have her narrative. Dad stood to leave. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Do you really? You stood up for yourself. I should have taught you to do that years ago instead of teaching you to sacrifice for family peace. After he left, I sat with my phone, scrolling through the comments on Camila's post. Friends offering support, asking if she needed help moving, praising her strength during difficult times. I opened a new browser window and started typing. The blog post wrote itself. I titled it, "What Happens When You Steal from the Scapegoat Daughter," and published it anonymously on a popular family drama forum. Within hours, it had dozens of comments. Within days, it had thousands of shares. People were calling it justice porn and the most satisfying revenge story ever. I didn't tell anyone I wrote it. I didn't need the credit. 2 weeks later, I drove past Camila's house on my way to therapy. The realtor sign now had a bright red sold banner across it. I parked across the street and watched as a moving truck pulled away from the curb. The house looked smaller somehow, less impressive without all the party lights and celebration. My phone buzzed with a text from Brooke. Saw the moving truck. How do you feel? I typed back. Like I finally learned how to play chess. But as I drove away, I realized that wasn't entirely true. I hadn't just learned to play chess. I'd learned that sometimes the only way to win is to stop playing by other people's rules. The new apartment had floor-to-ceiling windows and enough space for a real dining table. I'd bought plants, lots of them, and they were actually thriving. Hope the succulent had 3 new friends now. A snake plant named Justice, a peace lily called Freedom, and a spider plant I dubbed Karma. I was watering Karma when my laptop chimed with an email notification. The sender made me pause. Yara Wise. Veronica, it read, I hope this made you feel better, but you destroyed the family. Camilla hasn't spoken to us in weeks. Your father barely sleeps. I hope your revenge was worth it. Mom. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, I didn't destroy it. I just stopped lying about it. Send. My phone rang immediately. Mom's name flashed on the screen. How dare you? She said without preamble. How dare you act like you're the victim here? I was the victim. You stole my money. We helped family. That's what families do. No, Mom. That's what dysfunctional families do. Healthy families ask permission before spending other people's money. Camila is devastated. She had to sell her dream home because of your selfishness. Camilla had to sell her dream home because she spent money that wasn't hers. Actions have consequences. She's your sister. And I was her sister when she thanked me publicly for generosity I never agreed to. Where was family loyalty then? Mom was crying now. You've torn us apart. I revealed what was already broken. We raised you better than this. You raised me to be convenient. There's a difference. I hung up and blocked her number. That evening, Dr. Martinez and I had our usual session. How are you processing the family estrangement? She asked. Better than I expected. It's quiet, but it's honest quiet. Do you miss them? I miss the idea of them. The family I thought I had before I realized what they actually were. And the revenge? Any regrets? I considered this. I don't think it was revenge. Revenge would have been destroying them for the sake of destruction. This was justice. I took back what was mine and made them face consequences for their actions. How does that feel? Like I finally learned to value myself as much as I value other people. My doorbell rang during dinner. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I looked through the peephole, Brooke was standing there with takeout bags. Intervention, she announced when I opened the door. Thai food and wine. We're celebrating. Celebrating what? Your book deal. I stared at her. What book deal? She grinned and pulled out her phone. The blog post you wrote? What happens when you steal from the scapegoat daughter? It's been shared over 1 million times. A literary agent reached out to the forum administrators asking to contact the author. How do you know I wrote it? Please. I've known you since we were kids. Your voice is unmistakable. She showed me the email thread. A New York agent wanted to discuss expanding the story into a memoir about family manipulation and financial abuse. They're offering a real advance, Veronica. Like, pay off your student loans money. I sat down hard on my couch. This is insane. This is karma. We spent the evening going through the agent's proposal. The working title was The Silent Return, a memoir of family, money, and justice. You know what the best part is? Brooke said, refilling our wine glasses. Camilla will probably read it and finally understand what she put you through. Camilla will read it and find a way to make herself the victim. Probably, but everyone else will see the truth. The next morning, I called the agent. Her name was Rebecca, and she had a voice like warm honey and steel. Your story resonated with thousands of people, she said. Family financial abuse is more common than people realize, but it's rarely discussed openly. And you think there's a market for a full memoir? I think there's a need for it. Your voice is authentic. Your story is compelling. And your resolution is satisfying without being vindictive. What's the timeline? If you're interested, we could have a book proposal ready in 6 weeks. Publishers are already asking questions. I looked around my bright apartment, at my thriving plants, at the stack of therapy books that had helped me rebuild my sense of self. Let's do it. That afternoon, I started writing. Not the angry, hurt woman who discovered her family's betrayal, but the woman who learned to fight back with intelligence instead of emotion. The first chapter began. The first time I saw my divorce settlement check, I cried. Not because $25,000 was life-changing money, it wasn't, but because it meant I was finally free. As I wrote, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw your blog post. Proud of you. Dad. I smiled and kept typing. Outside my window, the sun was setting over the lake. My plants cast long shadows across the hardwood floors. Somewhere across town, my family was probably having dinner without me, pretending everything was normal. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. Sometimes karma needs a little help, but when you give it that help, it pays you back with interest.
My name is Riley Maddox. I'm 32 years old, and up until 5 minutes ago, I was eating roast beef at my grandmother's dining table, like any other daughter visiting home. Now, I'm face down on the hardwood floor, my wrists locked behind me, and my brother's knee digging into my back with the force of an accusation he's been rehearsing for years. "You're under arrest," Ethan says, loud enough for the chandelier to tremble. "Impersonating a military officer. Theft of government property." The room filled with 23 relatives who once knew how to spell my name goes silent. Forks freeze midair. Aunt Sharon gasps. Grandma Eleanor, wheelchair-bound and barely 75 pounds, grips her linen napkin like it's the last shred of dignity left in the room. And me, I don't resist. I don't beg. I stare at the ceiling fan slowly spinning above the peach cobbler and wonder how many more seconds I have before the backup Ethan smugly called arrives to drag me out. Except backup does arrive, just not his. The front door bursts open, and when the boots hit the floor and the medals catch the light, it isn't Ethan they salute, it's me. "Brigadier General Maddox," the officer says, saluting crisply. "Ma'am, we're here to extract you." And suddenly, 23 family members, including my brother, go very, very quiet. I used to think silence was the price of ambition, that if I worked hard enough, rose high enough, the noise of judgment would fall away on its own. But silence isn't the absence of noise. It's the weight of what people think they know about you pressed down so hard, it squeezes the breath out of your own truth. Growing up in Northern Carolina, I was the one nobody could quite figure out. My brother Ethan was the obvious choice for Admiration's star athlete class. President went straight into police academy, with a scholarship and a smile that made our father proud. I, on the other hand, was the intense child, too curious, too quiet, too precise. I kept notebooks filled with maps of global conflicts, read military field manuals under my blanket, and practiced Morse code instead of playing dress-up. My mother used to whisper to her sister during church picnics, "Riley's just different. She doesn't make things easy for herself." My father thought I was going through a phase right until the day I told him I'd been accepted into the Western Tactical Academy, one of the toughest military academies in the country. He looked up from his coffee, blinked twice, and said, "You don't need to prove anything to anyone, especially not in a uniform." Ethan had just come home from his second year in police school. He laughed without looking at me. "She'll quit before the second week. That place isn't for girls who overthink things." That was the last summer I stayed home. I left quietly. No big send-off. No family dinner. Just a ride share to the airport at dawn and a bag packed with precision. I didn't look back. What they didn't know, what I never explained, was that I wasn't running away to prove anything. I was running toward the only place that made sense. Somewhere rules meant something. Somewhere duty wasn't a punchline. I trained hard, learned fast. And while Ethan was pinning on his sergeant badge in Greenville, I was crossing borders my family couldn't even point to on a map, let alone comprehend. They stopped asking about my work after a while. I stopped offering. And that silence, it grew between us like vines over something once living. Until the Sunday I came back. Not for Ethan, not for our parents, but because Grandma Eleanor sent me a handwritten invitation, and I owed her more than silence. Grandma's letter was written in the same soft cursive I remembered from childhood birthday cards, blue ink, steady handpaper that smelled faintly of talcum powder and lemon oil. "Dinner at 2 sharp, sweetheart. Everyone will be there. I miss hearing your voice." So I booked a flight, pulled 2 days leave, and chose my outfit like I was planning for a ceasefire. No uniform, no insignia. Just a simple black dress sleeves to the elbow pearls, small enough to pass as modest. I tied my hair back and packed light. I didn't expect this to be easy, but I owed her kindness, even if the rest of them never earned it. The house hadn't changed. White brick green shutters, the same ceramic frog on the porch. What had changed was the weight in the air as I stepped inside. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Glasses clinked awkwardly. I kissed Grandma's cheek and tried to ignore the way Ethan's eyes followed me across the room like a slow-burn security camera. The table was set for 24. Roast beef, green bean casserole, cornbread, peach cobbler cooling near the window. It looked perfect, just like it did every holiday growing up, and somehow more dangerous than any foreign embassy I'd ever entered. I sat between Aunt Carla and my teenage cousin Eli, who immediately asked if I'd been somewhere cool. I smiled and said, just DC, which was true if you counted the sub-basement war room at Fort Moss. The small talk didn't last. Halfway through the meal, Ethan cleared his throat. "So, Riley," he said carefully, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. "Still doing that? Consulting gig." His voice was casual, but I felt the shift in the room, the way all heads tilted slightly toward me, waiting. "Still at it?" I said. "Same contracts, different problems." He chuckled once. "Strange. I looked up your company last week. Couldn't find a single record of it. Not a website, not a phone number, not even a LinkedIn profile. You'd think a professional consultant would at least have a business card." Someone snorted quietly. "Maybe Cousin Rachel." Grandma stiffened, but didn't speak. I forced a polite smile. "Some clients prefer discretion." Ethan leaned back, his expression sharpening. "Or maybe it's easier to pretend to have a job when no one can verify anything. No colleagues, no supervisors. Just Riley and her endless classified excuses." My stomach clenched, not out of guilt, but because I knew this was no longer dinner. This was the opening statement of a case he'd been building, and every guest at that table, they were his jury. He stood up. Just like that napkin-folded chair sliding back with the scrape of finality, Ethan rose from his seat like a prosecutor stepping into closing arguments. "I've spent the last 4 months looking into her," he said, pulling a manila folder from beneath his blazer, like a magician revealing the final trick. Photos, surveillance, witness accounts. He laid it on the table, opened the flap, and began passing pictures down the line. Grainy shots of me, entering secure buildings, leaving nondescript vehicles, picking up my dry cleaning, with military dress blues visible under the plastic. My mother looked at them with a slow blinking frown. My father stared straight ahead. Eli's fork froze mid-air. Ethan Grandma's voice was thin but sharp. "What is this evidence, Grandma?" he said smoothly. "Of fraud, of stolen valor, of a fabricated life built to deceive this entire family." He turned to me, then eyes gleaming. "You wear medals you didn't earn. You lie about where you go, and you think we're all too stupid or sentimental to call you on it. But I'm not. Not anymore." He pulled his badge from his pocket and laid it next to the folder. "As a sworn officer of Greenville County, I'm placing you under arrest." I didn't move. The room tilted just slightly, the way it sometimes did when a bomb threat wasn't confirmed, but still likely. "You don't have jurisdiction over me," I said calmly. My voice didn't shake. My hands stayed folded in my lap. "You're not in a combat zone now, Riley," he said. "You're in Grandma's house, my jurisdiction. And this is real life. Not your fantasy." The handcuffs clicked open in his hands. Aunt Carla gasped. I stood slowly. Not because I feared what was coming, but because I refused to give him the theater he wanted. My chair didn't screech. My face didn't change. When he reached for my wrists, I gave them to him. The metal was cold and tight. He made sure of that. "Riley Maddox," he said, voice rising, "you have the right to remain silent." "Don't do this," Grandma said, standing with effort. "This is not how we handle things." He didn't even look at her. The cuffs locked. My arms ached from the angle. 23 people watched the girl they used to know become a criminal in their minds. watched her be stripped of identity and dignity in one sweep of noise and certainty. And I didn't resist. Because some wars aren't fought with fists. They're won in what happens next. The front door blew open like it had been waiting for its cue. No knock, no announcement. Just 6 sets of combat boots pounding across Grandma Eleanor's hardwood floor, their cadence crisp, their silence louder than any siren. The first man through was tall, silver-haired, and wearing more ribbons than anyone in that room had likely seen in real life. His dress blues were immaculate, his posture rigid with purpose. I knew that walk, that face, that voice. Major General Sterling Cross. He didn't look at Ethan. Not at first. He looked at me, standing there, arms behind my back wrists, cuffed and skin already bruising. His expression changed in an instant, from controlled neutrality to something sharp and cold. "Lieutenant Montgomery," he said, voice cutting through the dining room, like an order across a war zone. "Step away from the general, right now." Ethan blinked one hand, still gripping my elbow. "Excuse me?" he said, half laughing. "Who are you?" General Cross didn't repeat himself. He stepped forward. The other officers fanned out behind him. Their uniforms gleamed under the chandelier. My brother's badge. It suddenly looked like a toy in a grown-up's game. Ethan cleared his throat. "Sir, with all due respect, this is police business. This woman is what she is," General Cross interrupted, "is a decorated officer of the United States Army with active clearance above your entire department combined. She has served in 4 theaters, led 2 joint intelligence task forces, and briefed the National Security Council." He turned his gaze toward the man who had handcuffed me. His voice dropped lethal now. "And what you've done, Lieutenant, is detain a federal asset in the middle of an ongoing classified operation." The words didn't hit Ethan all at once. I watched them break over his face in waves, first disbelief, then confusion, then the beginning of something like horror. "I didn't know," he stammered. "She never said you didn't ask," I said quietly. The cuffs were removed with swift precision by a junior officer. I rotated my wrists once slowly, letting the red marks show. I turned toward Ethan, and for the first time in my life, I watched my older brother look at me and finally see me, not the misfit, not the mystery, not the shadow behind his promotions, but the woman who outranked everyone in that house. General Cross saluted. "Brigadier General Maddox," he said loud and clear for all 23 relatives to hear. "Ma'am, we're here to extract you." The dining room froze. The only sound was the hissing of Grandma's oxygen tank and the quiet clink of Ethan's badge falling from his hand onto the rug. And just like that, the trial Ethan had prepared for me became his own reckoning. Ethan stepped back, like the air had betrayed him. His lips parted, but no words came. Around us, the silence was no longer stunned. It was heavy, accusatory, suffocating. My cousin Laurel dropped her fork. Uncle Mason leaned forward, as if trying to convince himself he wasn't witnessing what he was witnessing. My father looked like he might be sick. And my mother had covered her mouth with one trembling hand. As if that could hide the fact that for years she'd nodded along to every doubt Ethan ever voiced about me. Ethan's eyes locked on mine. You let me do this," he said hoarsely. "You knew who you were. You could have stopped this." I tilted my head. "You didn't want the truth, Ethan. You wanted a confession." He opened his mouth again, but General Cross stepped between us. "You conducted unauthorized surveillance on a federal officer," he said coldly, "including staking out her residence, photographing her movements, and hiring private investigators with no security clearance. You jeopardized multiple operations in the field." "I thought she was lying," Ethan shouted, desperate now. "She never told us anything. You all thought I was less. Because I stayed silent," I cut in. "Because I didn't need your approval to matter." He stared at me, stripped now of every ounce of certainty. "You could have just told me." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You don't get to weaponize curiosity and then demand honesty. You weren't asking questions. You were digging graves." Behind me, Major Blackwell, my second in command, handed General Cross a slim dossier. His expression shifted as he scanned its contents. 3 compromised operations, he muttered almost to himself. 2 agents dead in extraction. Communications breach confirmed. Ethan swayed slightly on his feet. I didn't mean to, but you did. Blackwell snapped. You thought you were exposing a fraud. What you exposed was a general, and in the process, you got good people killed. I turned back toward the table. 23 faces still frozen in place. No one moved. No one made a sound. Except for Grandma Eleanor. She lifted her eyes, voice barely above a whisper. Riley, is this true? You've been serving all this time? I looked at her then, at the only one who'd asked without judgment in her voice. Yes, Grandma, I said. And for the first time in years, I let the truth be seen. Every single day. 3 weeks later, I sat at the head of a steel conference table inside Fort Wexler's secure intelligence wing. The blinds were drawn. The seal of the Department of Defense gleamed behind me. I wore my dress uniform not for show, but for clarity. The door opened. 2 federal marshals escorted Ethan in. No badge, no belt. Just a gray suit that hung loose on a body that had lost the weight of arrogance. He didn't look like the man who'd shoved me to the floor in front of our entire family. He looked like someone who'd finally realized the gravity of the hole he'd dug. Mr. Montgomery, I said, keeping my tone flat. Please sit. He obeyed without a word. I slid a document across the table toward him, a full summary of the surveillance operation he had conducted against me. Every photo, every conversation he'd had with private contractors, every point of failure. This is the scope of what you did, I said. You didn't just humiliate me in front of our family. You compromised federal operations. You exposed me, and by extension my team. 2 of our assets were pulled out of position the night after your little performance. 1 didn't make it out. He flinched. I didn't know, he whispered. I thought that I was lying, I finished. Because the truth didn't fit the story you needed. Ethan looked up. There was no more bravado in his eyes. No courtroom voice, no smirk. I was jealous, he said softly. Of your silence. Of your confidence. Of the fact that Grandma looked at you like she knew there was more to you. I wanted to drag you down so you'd look human again. I sat back, letting the words hang. And now he swallowed hard. I know I was wrong. I nodded once, cold and clean. I'm recommending prosecution, I said. No family interference, no special considerations. You'll face sentencing like anyone else who compromises national security. He didn't argue. For the first time in his life, Ethan had nothing left to say. The call came 2 nights later. Grandma Eleanor. Her voice was steadier than I expected. I know what he did, she said. I don't want to excuse it, but I need to ask you something. I closed the file I'd been reviewing, leaned back in my chair. I'm listening. I'm not calling for Ethan, she said. I'm calling for you. I watched my grandson humiliate you. And I watched you stay still, composed, quiet, not because you were weak, but because you knew who you were. I've never been more proud, but Riley, I don't want this family to disappear, not completely. I let the silence stretch. Let it settle between us like the dust of an old war neither of us asked for. I'm not coming back for Christmas dinners, Grandma, I said gently. I didn't think you would, she whispered. But I wanted to hear your voice, to say it plainly. You deserved better than we gave you. My throat tightened, not with grief, but with something quieter, something that had waited 32 years to be heard. I know. Whatever happens with Ethan, she added, he'll live with it. But I hope someday you'll let yourself live too. Not just serve. It was the only thing anyone had said to me in months that didn't sound like apology or damage control. Just love. I'm trying, I said. I know, she replied. I always knew. And for once I believed her. Now when people ask me about that night, about the dinner, the arrest, the boots marching into Grandma's house, I don't tell them about the chaos. I don't talk about the cuffs or the folder or the way silence dropped over that table like a guillotine. I tell them this. There is power in patience. There is clarity in choosing not to perform for people who've already decided who you are. And there is freedom in truth, even if it comes late, even if it costs you something. Ethan once thought he was saving the family from a fraud. But what he really exposed was a legacy no one in that room was ready to face. Mine. Not the loudest, not the most praised, but the one who kept the country safer day after day without asking for applause. And if I had to do it again, fly in quietly, sit down at that table, feel the cuffs snap around my wrists, I would. Because now, when people hear the name General Riley Maddox, they don't see a mystery. They see a woman who endured, a woman who served, and a woman who refused to be erased even by her own blood. That's the legacy I chose, and I wear it better than any badge ever could. My name is Elise Warren, and I thought my family loved me, until they stole everything my grandfather left for me. He raised me when my parents were too busy. He taught me how to work with my hands, how to keep promises, how to stay kind even when the world wasn't. When he passed, they said there was nothing left. Just a casual shrug from my uncle, a forced smile from my mother, and a fake sympathy card from my brother that read, "Sorry it didn't work out." Grandpa must have changed his mind. I wanted to believe them, but I knew better. They were lying. The inheritance was supposed to change my life. Instead, it vanished overnight. No answers, no records, just silence. I tried asking questions. I tried calling lawyers. I even dug through probate court filings myself. Nothing. They closed every door. For 6 months, I lived in a one-bedroom apartment, over a diner kitchen, listening to the clatter of plates at 2 a.m., wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. Then, one morning, someone knocked on my door. He wore a gray suit, carried a leather briefcase, and said 6 words that changed everything, "Miss Warren. I'm the executor of the real will." What he told me next, it broke everything wide open. And by the end of this story, the people who betrayed me would wish they'd never touched what was mine. The day they read the will, I showed up in black slacks and a pressed shirt. Everyone else dressed like they were headed to brunch. My cousin Mitchell was laughing in the corner, phone in hand. His fiancée nudged him. "If it's what we think it is, we could go lakefront." Aunt Renee had a champagne bottle half visible in her tote. Even my brother, who barely spoke to Grandpa, looked smug. And my mother, she didn't look at me once. The lawyer, not Grandpa's longtime attorney, someone new, handed out sealed envelopes. I opened mine slowly. Blank. A single blank sheet of paper. No check, no letter, no explanation. I stared at it like it might shift and reveal something. Anything. Mitchell broke the silence. $150,000, baby." He high-fived my brother across the table. Renee squealed. Someone popped the champagne, and I was just sitting there. I leaned toward the lawyer. "There's nothing in here," I said. She glanced down, then replied evenly. "Your grandfather revised the will shortly before his death. According to the version filed, your portion was rescinded." Rescinded. My mother finally turned toward me with a soft, syrupy voice. "Sweetheart, don't take it personally. Maybe he thought you didn't need it." Didn't need it. I walked out without another word. I didn't want them to see my hands shaking. That night, I sat in my car and stared at the dashboard until morning. Not a single message from anyone. No apology, no explanation. Just silence. In the days that followed, I tried to make sense of it. I dug up old voicemails from Grandpa, birthday calls, long chats, his laugh. Nothing in his voice ever hinted at betrayal. He used to tell me, "If things ever go sideways, you hold the line, Elise. You're the only one I trust." But when it mattered, there was no line, no trust, no inheritance, nothing. I tried contacting the attorney listed on the envelope. Number disconnected. Email bounced. When I pulled public records, I found something worse. Grandpa's usual lawyer had retired suddenly. The will had been filed by someone else entirely, a man with no record of working with my grandfather before. When I asked about the original document, I was told that's sealed under court order. "You're not a listed beneficiary. I wasn't just written out, I was erased. Meanwhile, Mitchell posted Instagram stories from a new house with granite counters and a pool. My brother flashed a watch that cost more than my student debt. And my mother, she sent me a single text, "Don't stir up trouble, Elise. Let it go. Let it go." I was working 12-hour shifts and skipping meals, and somehow they expected me to believe this was all fair. Something was wrong, not just morally, legally. I didn't know what yet, but I knew one thing: they weren't afraid of what I'd lost. They were afraid of what I might find. It happened on a Monday. Rain sliding down the kitchen window, bills stacked by the sink. I was slicing onions for a soup I couldn't afford meat for when the knock came. 3 short, deliberate raps. I wiped my hands and opened the door. He stood there in a charcoal gray suit. Not young, not old, clean-shaven, neatly pressed. He held a leather briefcase, and something in his eyes told me this wasn't a sales pitch. "Miss Elise Warren," I nodded. "My name is John Alcott. I'm the court-appointed executor of Henry Warren's sealed will." My mouth went dry. I stared at him, not moving, not speaking. Because I'd heard that name, executor, but not in connection to anything real. Not since they told me the inheritance was gone. "You might want to sit down," he added. "This isn't going to be a quick conversation." I led him inside. He didn't comment on the peeling linoleum or the broken cabinet handle. He simply sat, opened his briefcase, and placed 2 documents on the table. One was stamped and sealed with the county court's insignia. The other, I recognized immediately. It was the document they'd read at the firm. The fake one. "What is this?" I whispered. He tapped the county-stamped one. "This is your grandfather's final court-registered will. Signed, witnessed, and sealed 6 weeks before his death. I've been authorized to execute it now that several irregularities came to light." I swallowed hard. "Irregularities." He nodded slowly. "Someone filed a forged version, with a falsified signature and notarization. That's the one your family received and read aloud." I stared down at the fake will. It looked so official, so final. And yet it was nothing more than a cover story. They told me there was nothing I said. "I know," he replied. "That's why I'm here." He opened a folder and showed me a list of asset transfers, properties, investment accounts, antique sales. Every item was marked withheld, blocked, in violation. I could hardly breathe. It was all still there. "So, the inheritance?" I asked, voice barely audible. He gave a small, measured smile. "Very much intact. And under the law, you were never removed." For a moment, I couldn't move. Because everything I had accepted as a loss, my future, my dignity, my grandfather's love, wasn't gone. It had just been buried. Deliberately. By people who shared my last name. John Alcott didn't speak like a lawyer. He spoke like someone used to being ignored until the last moment, and then turning everything upside down. He laid out the timeline like a puzzle already solved. 6 weeks before my grandfather died, he had filed a sealed will through a private court channel, a method used when beneficiaries are likely to face harassment or intimidation. "Your grandfather knew someone would try to alter his intentions," John said. "So he made sure the truth couldn't be tampered with." In that sealed will, I was left 42% of the estate. 42. It wasn't just money. It was land, stock, a house, and a family trust account tied to wartime patents I didn't even know he owned. The rest had been divided between my cousins, a small donation to a veterans relief fund, and one final clause: Elise Warren shall inherit the controlling stake in Warren Antiques and Holdings. I blinked. The antique business had been sold off, I thought. Liquidated. No, John corrected. It was listed as liquidated in a falsified document. But your grandfather never signed those transfer papers. That signature was copied. Poorly. He handed me a photograph. It was a copy of a notary stamp, the same stamp used on the forged will. Except, the woman listed as the notary. She died 2 years before the will was supposedly signed. The room went quiet. "We believe the forgery was arranged internally," John said calmly, "by someone with access to your grandfather's personal records, medical appointments, signatures, routine banking patterns." I didn't need to ask who. The image came to me without invitation, my mother holding Grandpa's checkbook while he recovered from surgery, my uncle always offering to help with the paperwork, and my brother standing silently behind them, knowing watching. The document they read at the law firm wasn't a mistake. It was an ambush, a cold-blooded maneuver to push me out quietly permanently. "Why didn't you come sooner?" I asked. John's expression tightened. I was denied access. The court was notified the will had already been executed. By the time we cross-verified the documents, months had passed. But now that the fraud has been identified, he slid over a sealed envelope. "This is your formal reinstatement. You are the primary beneficiary, Elise. And I've already filed a motion to freeze all transferred assets pending full review." Everything stopped in that moment. The yacht Mitchell bragged about, the Iceland vacation my aunt took to grieve my brother's $90,000 crypto venture, all of it stolen on borrowed time. I sat there in silence, not triumphant, not angry. Just hollow. Because you grow up thinking betrayal will come like a scream. But sometimes it walks in wearing your family's perfume, smiles with your mother's face, and calls you sweetheart as it empties your future. John stood up to leave. "They'll be notified within 48 hours, he said. "Expect noise." I asked quietly, "What happens if they deny it?" He paused at the door. "Then we go to court. And this time, they won't be the ones holding the microphone." The notice from the court went out on a Thursday. By Friday morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Mitchell left 12 voicemails, most of them incoherent. His voice cracked between outrage and panic, like someone watching their house catch fire with all the doors locked. Aunt Renee sent a long, rambling text. It started with, "We didn't know," shifted into, "It wasn't our decision," and ended with, "Don't do anything you'll regret." And my mother, she didn't call, she came in person. She stood on my porch, holding a thermos and wearing pearls, her hands trembling just enough to look human. Her smile was the same one she used to wear at PTA meetings, polished, performative, and meaningless. "Elise," she said through the screen door, "we should talk. We're still family." I didn't open the door. John stood behind me in the hallway and spoke in a level voice, his words stripped of all sentiment. "Don't engage. The investigation is open now." Over the next few days, things moved quickly. Faster than I expected. Faster than they could prepare for. Warren Antiques was placed under temporary court supervision. The family trust was frozen, its disbursements halted. And I was granted a protective order, not from journalists or creditors, but from my own relatives. Mitchell tried to move funds from an offshore account. The bank flagged it before the wire went through. My uncle claimed he had been manipulated, but his email history told a different story. In one message, he corresponded directly with someone known for selling forged notary seals. It was all right there, names, dates, the paper trail of betrayal. Then came the twist I never saw coming. John requested access to a secondary vault listed under my grandfather's name, a safe deposit box that hadn't been touched in over a year. It was registered in my grandfather's own handwriting. When the box was opened at First Fidelity Bank, 3 things were inside: a signed copy of the handwritten will, a sealed letter addressed to me, and a flash drive. John handed me the envelope privately. I opened it alone that night. The letter was dated 6 weeks before Grandpa died. His handwriting was familiar, firm, but slanted like always. The letter began simply, "If you're reading this, it means they did exactly what I feared." He wrote about the way he'd watched them over the years, circling his estate like scavengers. He wrote about the meals we shared, the afternoons I helped him shave, the nights I sat with him, while he forgot names and remembered wars. And then he wrote, "You never asked me for a thing. That's why I left you the key. To the trust. To the land. To everything they'll try to fake their way into." I didn't cry because of the money. I cried because it meant I hadn't imagined it. I had mattered to him. They just wanted me to doubt that until I disappeared. The flash drive held recordings. Conversations. One was between my uncle and someone labeled consultant. They discussed how to hide transfers and how to forge competency declarations to make it look like Grandpa had lost control of his faculties. It wasn't just theft, it was methodical, deliberate erasure. John submitted the recordings to the court the next day. That was when everything shifted. What began as a probate dispute turned into something heavier. Legal, criminal, forgery fraud conspiracy. 3 weeks later, I walked into probate court as someone entirely different from the girl who'd sat silently at the fake will reading. I was calm, present, ready. My mother sat in the gallery, her hands white-knuckled around her pearls. My brother wouldn't look at me. Mitchell started crying before the judge entered the room. The court was cold, neutral, but I wasn't. I didn't need to speak much. John handled the arguments. The documentation spoke for itself. The paper trail was louder than any of their voices. And when the judge formally reinstated the original sealed will, I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just exhaled. Quietly. As I turned to leave the courtroom, John caught up with me in the hallway and handed me a folded note. "There's one more thing," he said. "Your grandfather created a private designation not legally binding, but personally significant. It names a successor trustee for the foundation accounts tied to his military patents." I unfolded the paper. It was brief. 4 words. Written in clean black ink. Elise Warren, sole trustee. It wasn't just a victory. It was a statement. They had tried to cut me out. Instead, I had become the one name they couldn't escape. The silence after the ruling was its own kind of verdict. My family, once so loud with opinions and justifications, vanished. No more voicemails, no more lectures about gratitude, just absence, and I welcomed it. Mitchell lost the house first, then the car, then the carefully curated online image of success. His profile picture disappeared, replaced by a blank icon. Aunt Renee was removed from 2 nonprofit boards within days of the fraud becoming public. Her name, once printed on charity brochures, stopped showing up entirely. My uncle's law license was suspended pending investigation into fiduciary misconduct. He issued a statement about being misled, but no one bought it. The email said otherwise. And my mother. She never apologized, not once. She sent a final message, short and bitter. "I hope you're satisfied," it read. As if telling the truth had made me cruel. But I wasn't satisfied. Not exactly. I was exhausted. I had spent nearly a year clawing through sealed doors and quiet lies. What I felt now wasn't triumph. It was stillness, like the first breath after surfacing from deep water. Once the court transferred control of the trust, I drove out to the land my grandfather left me. 42 acres untouched since childhood. I hadn't been back in years, but everything felt familiar. The narrow trail, the pine trees leaning slightly east, the hollow thud of my boots on the old wooden steps of the cabin. Inside, dust coated everything. But the silence was comforting. There was a photo on the mantel, me at 8, hair-tangled, holding a fishing rod, beaming like I belonged. I sat down in his old chair and let myself remember the version of life that made sense. Not the boardrooms, not the probate filings, but the quiet mornings when he taught me how to hold a compass and draw maps in the dirt. I didn't cry for what they'd taken. I cried for what I'd nearly forgotten that I had mattered, that someone had seen me as worth protecting, that all along I wasn't crazy for sensing the coldness beneath their smiles. That evening, I locked the cabin and put the key in my pocket, not out of fear that anyone would steal what was inside, but because I finally understood what it meant to hold something no one else could touch. Not money, not property, memory, legacy, choice. I didn't return their calls. I didn't respond to reporters. I didn't answer when distant relatives suddenly remembered my number. They wanted access. I wanted peace. And I kept the one promise I made to myself the night John Alcott first knocked on my door. I would move forward. But not with them. Justice didn't come with applause. There was no dramatic outburst in court, no tearful confession, no final scene where they admitted they were wrong. It came quietly. Through legal filings, through signed orders, through the silence that followed when the truth settled in and no one had anywhere left to run. After everything was finalized, I didn't go looking for revenge. I didn't want it. What would I do with their apologies now, when every lie had already cost me time, energy, and something harder to name, the part of me that once believed they could still change. What I needed wasn't revenge. It was recovery, dignity, truth I didn't have to beg for. For a while, I stayed on the land, repaired what needed fixing, cleaned out the cabin. I read my grandfather's journal's notes from a man who saw through the people closest to him, but still chose to hope anyway. That was his flaw, or maybe his strength. It made me think about what I inherited beyond assets or documents. I inherited a warning. That trust should be earned, not assumed. That silence can be just as violent as a slap. And that family, real family, is not defined by blood, but by behavior. I also learned that standing alone doesn't mean you're lost. Sometimes it means you're the only one not lying to yourself. For years I played along, smiled at holidays, nodded through backhanded compliments. Let myself believe that loyalty meant staying quiet while others rewrote the truth. But silence is not loyalty. Silence is complicity. And I don't owe anyone my silence anymore. What happened in court wasn't just a legal correction. It was a line in the sand. They stepped over it. I didn't. I never went back to the house where my mother used to keep my childhood photos in a box marked later. I never responded to the cousins who suddenly remembered my birthday once the trust was redistributed. I didn't block them. I didn't fight them. I just disappeared from their story. Because the one I'm writing now doesn't have space for people who needed me small to feel big. I sit on the cabin porch sometimes and wonder if they tell themselves a different version now. One where I was cruel. One where I stole what was rightfully theirs. But I don't worry about it. Not anymore. The truth has its own gravity. It doesn't need me to defend it. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's this: you can survive betrayal. You can rebuild from broken trust. And sometimes the most powerful thing you'll ever do is walk away without burning anything down. They lied, forged, and manipulated, and in the end, they lost the one thing they were so desperate to control: their place in my life. I didn't win by destroying them. I won by refusing to be like them. And that will always be enough. My name is Alyssa Kincaid, and this morning I sat across from the people who gave me life, watching them try to erase mine. We were 6 feet apart in courtroom 14B. The lighting buzzed overhead, sharp and sterile, while the bailiff called the case. On the plaintiff's side, Charles and Loretta Kincaid, my parents. On the defense, me. Just me. They were suing me for fraud, claiming I'd stolen the identity of a veteran who had died overseas. Claimed I forged documents to collect benefits I didn't deserve. Claimed I'd built my whole life on a lie. They didn't even look at me. I didn't flinch when the lawyer laid out their so-called evidence: the absence of military photos, the missing discharge papers, the fact that no one could confirm I ever served. They painted a picture of a woman living in delusion, a daughter desperate for attention. I stayed silent. My hands folded. My uniform wasn't on my body. It was folded neatly at home in a cedar chest. But I could still feel the seam of the old combat patch under my skin. Still remember the smell of Kandahar sand, the metallic bite of blood, the tremor in the medic's voice, when I took over compressions. They thought silence meant guilt. Then the judge spoke. She leaned forward, voice clear but low. "I recognize the defendant," she said. "Miss Kincaid. I served with her." The room froze, and for the first time in years, so did my parents' certainty. I was 18 when I left that house, barely an adult, head shaved for boot camp, my mother's goodbye, no more than a cold nod at the doorframe. She didn't hug me. My father said, "Just don't embarrass us." I told myself it didn't matter, that I was building something they'd never be able to deny. But denial, I'd learn, was their specialty. Growing up in the Kincaid household meant earning affection like rent. My brother Mason played the game well, varsity everything, charming grin, business degree from Duke. I was the girl who read too much, asked too many questions, didn't smile in family photos. When I enlisted, they said it was a phase, some dramatic rebellion. They told neighbors I was taking time off to find myself. Not once did they mention I'd joined the army. Not once did they ask where I was deployed. When I came home 3 years later, scarred, limping ribs still healing, they didn't even meet me at the gate. I arrived at their front door in Savannah with a duffel bag, a folded letter of commendation, and a bronze star tucked under my shirt. My mother looked through the peephole, opened the door halfway, and said, "Oh, you're back." That was it. She didn't ask where I'd been. My father asked if I still had my health insurance. They never asked what happened the night the convoy was hit, or why I flinch at propane igniters. They certainly didn't ask why I hadn't come home sooner. Eventually, I stopped trying. I moved into a studio near the river, volunteered at a trauma clinic that didn't ask questions, filed my paperwork for veteran benefits. Through a low-cost legal aid group benefits I qualified for barely thanks to an amended file that still carried a confidential classification stamp. I didn't push back, just survived. But apparently, even that was too much. When the lawsuit arrived certified mail on a gray January morning, I thought it was a mistake. I stared at the envelope like it had come from another world. But there it was in my father's precise cursive, Charles E. Kincaid versus Alyssa R. Kincaid. The claim that I was impersonating a veteran, that no one by my name had served, that I was faking PTSD for handouts. I should have been furious. Instead, I laughed quiet bitter, like something cracking loose inside my chest. They hadn't just forgotten me. They'd rewritten me. And now they wanted the law to finish the job. The thing about silence is, it's not always passive. Sometimes silence is the sharpest answer. The refusal to explain yourself to people who never cared enough to listen. That's what I told myself as I walked into the courthouse on the first day of trial, my heels echoing against the marble hands empty. No binder, no stack of exhibits. Just me in a charcoal coat hair, pulled back breath even. I didn't need to prove I existed. But God, it still hurt to be erased. The courtroom smelled like lemon polish and recycled air. My parents sat flanked by their attorney, some coastal litigator, who probably thought this would be an easy win. Charles wore the same suit he always wore to church. Loretta had on her navy dress with the silver buttons, the one she'd bought for Mason's graduation. Both of them looked immaculate. So believable, so concerned. Their lawyer wasted no time. He called me unstable, said I'd fabricated military records using stolen credentials, presented a discrepancy in Department of Defense listings, no Alyssa R. Kincaid, no enlistment under my Social Security number, showed financial records of my veteran benefits, monthly deposits, therapy subsidies, subsidized housing credits, and the audience, some reporters, some strangers, one distant cousin I hadn't seen in a decade, nodded along like it all made sense. Because it did. On paper, I didn't exist. They'd wiped me clean. What no one knew, not yet, was that my unit in Kandahar had operated under a provisional joint task force, working with medevac extraction in classified routes. For 2 years, my identity had been redacted in every report for operational security. Even when I was airlifted out after the IED blast, my medevac form listed only a codename Delta Romeo Echo. The Army filed me as active non-disclosed, and my subsequent discharge paperwork went through a different system entirely. A smaller one. One that required clearance to access. But I couldn't say any of that. The minute I signed my non-disclosure agreement, I agreed to protect names, locations, outcomes, even at the cost of defending myself. So I sat there quiet. Not because I didn't have answers, but because I still honored the uniform even if no one else in that room would. I glanced at my father during a recess. He sipped bottled water, like he was parched from moral labor. Loretta adjusted her pearl earrings, eyes scanning the crowd for reactions, measuring headlines before they were even written. They had crafted this story carefully. A daughter goes rogue, comes home broken, makes up war stories for sympathy and state checks, a perfect cocktail of shame and pity. But they hadn't counted on one thing. Someone else in that room remembered the sand, the fire, the weight of a dying body on her back. And when she spoke, the entire story would shatter. Judge Talia Menendez had been quiet through most of the trial, professional composed eyes, steady behind thin-framed glasses. The kind of presence that doesn't announce itself, but settles in like stone. Her voice, when she did speak, was measured. Procedural. No one in the room seemed to know her story. No one but me. I hadn't seen her since Kandahar. Back then, she was Lieutenant Menendez, bleeding out behind a smoking Humvee, while I held a compression bandage to her shoulder, my own ribs cracked hands shaking from the blast. I remembered how she gripped my forearm eyes wide and whispered, "Don't stop." I didn't. Even when mortar fire rattled the sky above us, I didn't stop. But I had no way of knowing if she remembered me. Not until that moment. The morning of cross-examination, the courtroom was colder than usual. My father's lawyer kept pressing on the missing documents. He gestured to the chair where I sat and said, if she truly served, there would be evidence photos medals, a unit willing to back her. But instead, we have silence. We have myth. I didn't answer. I just looked toward the bench. And Judge Menendez blinked. Just once. Then lowered her gaze like something heavy had settled on her chest. When the court recessed for lunch, I stayed behind. Everyone else filed out buzzing with confidence, my parents chuckling softly with their attorney. I stood slowly, unsure what I'd say, but before I could move, Judge Menendez looked up. Her voice barely carried. "What was the name of your lead nurse?" she asked. I swallowed. "Marta Ruiz." "She called out coordinates while we packed your wounds." She nodded almost imperceptibly, then turned away. It wasn't approval, not yet, but it was memory. Real. Lived. Shared. The afternoon session started late. When we reconvened, the room felt different, like something under the surface had begun to shift. My father leaned in, whispering to his lawyer. Loretta had that pinched look she wore during tax season when numbers didn't align. They still thought they were winning. Then came the question that changed everything. The attorney gestured again, loud enough for the press to hear. "We ask the court, how can we trust the word of someone who can't even prove where she's been?" And Judge Menendez leaned forward. She didn't raise her voice, didn't bang the gavel. She simply said, "Counselor, I can tell you exactly where she's been." The room froze. "I served with her," she continued, her tone as sharp as winter air. "In Kandahar, 112th Medical Evacuation Battalion." She pulled me from a burning vehicle and held my artery shut with her bare hands. "I have the scar. I am the proof." There was no sound, not even a cough. Loretta clutched her pearls. My father sat back like someone had just struck him. Their lawyer opened his mouth, but nothing came out. And me, I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just exhaled for the first time in years. They adjourned early that day. No official statement, no dismissal of the case, just a stunned silence as people collected their belongings and shuffled out like they'd just witnessed something they weren't supposed to. My father stood up slowly, stiff in the shoulders. Loretta didn't speak. Her face had gone pale, like makeup layered over ice. I stayed seated until they were gone. I didn't want to walk behind them. Not anymore. Outside, the air was thick with humidity and tension. Reporters swarmed near the steps, but I kept my head down. Judge Menendez's words still echoed behind my ribs. I am the proof. 4 words stronger than every accusation they'd built. The next day, the courtroom was packed. Not just family, now veterans had shown up. Men in worn caps, women with clipped hair and steady eyes. Some I knew, some I didn't. But they sat behind me in quiet solidarity, hands folded as if to say, "We see you now." I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. The court clerk read in to record the declassification order, my personnel files, combat record commendations, all sealed due to a provisional joint task force had been cleared for release under emergency exception, signed by a Pentagon liaison the night before. Everything my parents said I had faked was now admissible. Medals, deployment logs, a handwritten field report from Kandahar with my name, blood type, and the initials MZ Major Zimmer, my commanding officer. Their lawyer objected, said this was last-minute theatrics, said it was unfair. Judge Menendez raised one brow. "So was bleeding out in a war zone while she held my artery." He sat down. I didn't speak during any of it. Not when the judge dismissed the lawsuit with prejudice. Not when the courtroom erupted in low murmurs and flickering glances. Not even when a young woman in uniform stepped forward and saluted as I left the bench. I just nodded and kept walking. That night, I returned to my small apartment, poured a glass of water, and stood by the window. I had thought it would feel like victory. It didn't. It felt like something closer to grief. Not for what they did, but for how easily they had done it. For how ready the world was to believe a woman like me was lying. For how small they made my truth seem when no one else stood beside it. They hadn't just tried to erase my service. They had tried to erase me. And if it hadn't been for one woman, one memory stitched into scar tissue, I might have let them. I set the glass down and walked to the cedar chest in the corner. I opened it slowly, my uniform pressed, my old field gloves, a coin from Lieutenant Menendez back when I saved her life, and she said, "Don't let them make you small." I hadn't. Not today. The news didn't run my name. Not really. There were a few mentions buried deep in local outlets. Georgia veteran cleared of fraud after high-profile family dispute. A single still photo of me exiting the courthouse, half-shadowed head down. No headline said daughter falsely accused by her own parents. No story detailed how the judge stopped everything with 6 words, and I preferred it that way. I didn't need the world to cheer. I just wanted it to stop whispering. The day after the case was dismissed, I unplugged my landline. I deleted my social media, not that I'd posted in years. Still, the messages came, voicemail transcripts from advocacy groups, requests for interviews, a non-profit offering to fund a documentary on military truth and family betrayal. I didn't answer. Let the voicemail pile up like leaves I had no intention of raking. This wasn't vindication. This was survival. My parents never called, not to explain, not to apologize, but I did receive something 2 weeks later, a letter in thick, expensive stationery, Charles's handwriting formal and heavy. No greeting. Just 4 sentences about regretful confusion and how familial dynamics are often complex. He signed it Dr. Charles E. Kincaid, as if we'd only ever been colleagues in some distant academic paper. I burned it without reading the last line. Truth be told, I didn't hate them. Not even then. Hate is active, it feeds on friction. But what I felt toward my parents was colder, like fog on glass. I had wanted to be seen once, needed it, begged for it in my younger years through medals, letters, folded flags, and silence. But somewhere in that courtroom, under the weight of Judge Menendez's voice and the flicker of recognition in a stranger's eyes, I stopped asking. I moved 3 months later. A small house in western North Carolina, tucked at the edge of Pisgah Forest. Just me, the trees, and the sound of running water beyond the back porch. I found work as a peer counselor at a regional veterans clinic. No titles on my door. No nameplate. Just Alyssa, the way I preferred it. Most of the people who came through didn't ask about my story, and I didn't offer it. They didn't need to know what happened in Kandahar. They just needed someone who understood why the scent of diesel made them twitch, or why silence was sometimes the loudest sound in a room. Some days I'd catch myself watching the door, as if expecting them, my father, Loretta, even Mason. But they never came. I heard through someone at the clinic that my brother took a job in Florida, some lobbying firm. My mother still hosted charity events. I became a footnote in their social script, the daughter who drifted the one we try to love from a distance. That was fine. Distances can be safe. One quiet Friday, just before closing, a man walked into the clinic. Mid-50s. Marine veteran by the build, and the way he scanned the exits before sitting. Scar across his neck, like a thick rope had once tried to end him. He didn't say his name. He sat across from me, calloused hands, folded eyes steady. "You the one from the trial?" he asked after a moment. I nodded slow. He didn't ask what happened. Didn't demand receipts. Just leaned back and said, "You stayed quiet. You didn't beg." I didn't know what to say to that. So I just said I wasn't going to let them tell my story for me. He tapped the armrest thoughtful. "That's the kind of strength people don't know how to praise," he murmured. "But the right people notice." Then he stood and left, like he'd only come to confirm something real still existed in the world. Later that evening, I returned home and checked the mailbox. No name on the envelope, just my address written by hand. Inside a photograph, old and grainy. Me kneeling beside a smoking Humvee, dirt across my face, blood-soaked gauze, pressed to a wound just off frame. My eyes locked, jaw set. In the corner, a single word barely legible. Menendez. She'd kept it all these years. Not for court, not for headlines. Maybe as proof. Maybe as a reminder. I framed the photo and placed it on the shelf above the fireplace. Not beside medals. Not near the folded flag. Just above a piece of wood I'd carved months earlier. The truth doesn't need to shout. Some kinds of justice don't come with applause. They arrive in silence, in the way your breath steadies again, in the way your name no longer burns in your own mouth, in the way you can look at your reflection and finally stop apologizing for surviving. I no longer measure time by deployments or court dates, not by anniversaries, not by letters that never arrived. These days, I count it differently, by how long the sunlight stays on the porch in the late spring, or by the way the wind shifts just before a thunderstorm rolls in. Time feels slower here, but it's the kind of slow that lets you breathe again. My name is Alyssa Kincaid, and I am no longer missing. After the case was dismissed, the Department of Defense reprocessed my file. A manila envelope arrived by certified mail one morning, tucked beneath the paw of my one-eyed rescue dog, who likes to guard the porch, like it's a military post. Inside the envelope was a simple certificate. Honorably discharged. Enlistment 2008. Division 112th Medical Evacuation. Awards Bronze Star Army Commendation with V device 3 letters of field recognition. It looked so unremarkable, so bureaucratic, but I ran my fingers over my name like it was a prayer. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to. My parents never called. I don't know if they ever read the final ruling, if they understood the weight of what they had done. Maybe they still believe I made it all up. Maybe that's easier for them than facing the truth that their daughter became someone they never took the time to know. Either way, I no longer carry their silence like a wound. It's just gone. Sometimes closure isn't an apology, it's just absence that no longer hurts. The small house I moved into sits along a ridge in western North Carolina. 2 bedrooms, 1 worn fireplace, a backyard with just enough room for tomatoes, and the ghosts I no longer have to outrun. I built a bench at the back of the property, facing the tree line. From there, you can see stars most nights, clear, unapologetic, exactly as they are. At the clinic where I work, people come and go. Some stay quiet for weeks before saying a word. Others open up fast, like the silence might eat them alive if they don't. I let them choose the pace. I don't talk about my trial unless someone asks, and even then I don't offer details. I just say, the truth survived. That's what matters. And it is. One evening, after a group session, a young vet lingered behind. Her name was Liv. Army signals, intelligence, small voice, steady eyes. She glanced toward the door, then looked at me. My parents still think I made it up, she said. The night attack, the fire, all of it. I nodded, not as sympathy, but recognition. They won't come around, she added. Maybe they don't need to, I replied. She didn't cry. She just exhaled, and in that breath was something I knew well, the release that comes when someone finally stops asking for permission to be real. That night, I sat out on the bench behind my house. The stars came early. Crickets hummed their low, constant song. I held a photo in my hand, the one Menendez had sent me. Kandahar. My face streaked with soot. Hands red, jaw tight. A sliver of light across my shoulder like a blade. That woman was still inside me. She had survived more than gunfire. She had survived being forgotten. And now she was building a life where she didn't need to be seen to exist. She just needed to stay true. My name is Freya Hayes, and on the day my brother was being honored by the Department of Defense, I wasn't even on the guest list. The sun was sharp over the naval base. I'd flown in under my own clearance in uniform, but without announcement. No aides, no family waiting. I stepped up to the security checkpoint at the main auditorium, handed over my ID, and watched the officer behind the podium frown. "I'm sorry, ma'am, "You're not listed for entry." I didn't flinch. I'd expected it. The list had never included me, not in family albums, not in group emails, not even at my grandfather's funeral. Behind the gate, I could already see them, my parents in matching gray coats, smiling in a sea of polished brass. My brother Lucas, on stage, receiving congratulations, with that easy charm he was born wearing. The security officer leaned in again. "Ma'am, could you repeat your name?" "Rear Admiral Freya Hayes," I said. Slowly, deliberately. He stiffened. "Hayes, A, pause." His earpiece crackled. One moment. Within seconds, another figure approached, taller, older, wearing the insignia of Fleet Command. His eyes locked on mine, then he saluted sharp and clean. "Ma'am," he said, voice firm. "We've been expecting you." He turned to the security team. "Escort Admiral Hayes through the officer's entrance." Immediately. As I walked past the gates that were meant to keep me invisible, I didn't look back. Because I wasn't here to be seen by them. I was here to be named. I was 13 the first time my mother told someone I was a little difficult. She said it with a smile, the kind people use at brunches when they talk about wildflowers invading their lawn. My brother had just won a leadership award at school. I had just finished building a model rescue ship out of recycled parts from my science teacher's junk pile. It even floated, but she never asked how. By the time I was 15, Lucas was already the family's future, a walking echo of my father's best years in uniform. He had the look, the stride, the natural ease that filled rooms. I had questions, and long silences, and the kind of ambition that made people uncomfortable when it wasn't packaged in charm. I joined the Navy on a scholarship they never talked about. My mother said I was running away. My father said I was wasting my spine on something that would eat me alive. And Lucas? He said nothing at all. Just watched me leave with the same quiet expression he wore at every dinner table when I spoke too much. For years, we barely spoke. I moved base to base, graduated top of my class, earned citations that only strangers seemed proud of. When I received my first command position in the Indo-Pacific, I mailed a formal note to my parents. It came back unopened. The last time I saw them was at my grandfather's funeral, or rather, at the empty church, an hour after the actual service had ended. They'd changed the time. No one told me. Not even Lucas. I stood in a room filled with leftover flowers and silence in full dress uniform, wondering how you could be erased so cleanly by people who still carried your name. There was no confrontation, no message afterward, just another wall built higher. I stopped sending updates. I stopped asking. But it never really stopped hurting. I read about Lucas's rise through the ranks, the same way strangers follow war heroes, through press releases, public statements, the occasional photo with brass behind a podium. He did well. Better than well. And I didn't resent him for that. I just resented that I'd been made invisible to make room for his light. So when word reached me quietly through a mutual contact at the Pentagon that Lucas was receiving the Cross of Merit at the national ceremony, something in me stirred. Not rage, not envy. Just a steady, unshakable weight in the chest, like something unfinished asking for air. I told no one I was going, not even my commanding officer. I filed personal leave, booked the ticket myself, and packed the uniform I hadn't worn in 6 months. I didn't know what I was walking into. I only knew one thing: I was done staying erased. As I stepped through the gates of the base that morning, everything was polished, clean lines, flags, catching the light just right, families clapping before anything even began. I walked alone, no name on the program, no seat reserved. And that was exactly how they designed it. But the thing about silence is, it doesn't erase truth. And mine was about to arrive, whether they wanted it or not. The hallway leading into the auditorium smelled like cold air and brass polish. I paused at the checkpoint, felt the stillness in my own breath. The officer behind the desk didn't know it, but he was standing at the edge of a story my family had spent decades burying. He asked for my name, and this time I gave it without flinching. Without explanation, because I wasn't there to knock on a door. I was there to walk straight through it. Part 2. The name not on the list, 720 words. The security checkpoint wasn't chaos. It was quiet, clinical, the kind of quiet that comes from practiced indifference. The officer scanned my ID again, jaw tight. He was young, probably not even born when I started service. Still, I could see the shift in his posture when the system didn't respond the way it should have. "I'm sorry, Admiral," he said carefully. "Your name doesn't appear on the authorized guest manifest for this event. I can check with command, no need," I replied steady. "If I'm not on the list, that's by design." "I'll wait." He blinked, unsure whether he'd misheard my tone, too calm, too certain. He gestured toward the side wall. I stepped aside, not humiliated, just observed. Through the glass, I could see them arriving in clusters. Wives in pressed navy blue toddlers, with paper flags, lieutenants smoothing out their collars. My family walked in like they'd rehearsed it. My mother's pearls caught the sun. My father's lapel pin gleamed. Lucas led the way, his uniform, immaculate movements precise. A golden sun in every measurable way. No one looked back. I didn't expect them to. A voice crackled in the security officer's headset. His eyebrows twitched. Then he stood straighter. "Excuse me, Admiral," he said. "Commander Rollins would like a word." A tall man approached from the left corridor, graying hair-hardened features, the insignia of Fleet Command high on his shoulder. I knew that face. He was there the night I coordinated a maritime evacuation in Luzon, when the typhoon cut off comms, and we still got every civilian out alive. He didn't smile. He saluted. "Admiral Hayes," he said clearly. "We've been looking for you." His voice was loud enough for the nearby staffers to glance up. I nodded and returned the salute. He gestured. "This way, ma'am. We'll take the officer's entrance. No confusion, no explanation, just recognition." As we walked down the inner corridor, I caught glimpses of the pre-ceremony setup flags, aligned cameras perched on risers, name cards on velvet chairs. One of them said Mr. and Mrs. Hayes. Another said Cole. Lucas Hayes. There was no card for me. Not even an anonymous placeholder. I wondered if my parents had asked about me. If Lucas had. We reached the staging room. The aide there offered me water. I declined. I took off my coat and smoothed my uniform sleeves. The silence of the room was oddly familiar, like every debriefing before a mission no one thought would succeed. Commander Rollins watched me. "Do they know you're here?" I met his gaze. "They will." He gave a short nod, not of sympathy, but of understanding. About damn time. A few minutes later, I stepped onto the side balcony of the auditorium. From there, I had a clear view of the seating area, the central podium, the massive projection screens playing highlights of Lucas's career deployments. Speeches, smiles. My mother laughed at something a general said. My father leaned back proud and composed. I knew that body language. It was the same pose he used at Lucas's high school graduation when he told me to take the picture, not be in it. The master of ceremonies adjusted the mic. The audience began to settle. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began today, "we gather to honor service legacy and leadership." I closed my eyes just briefly. My hands didn't tremble. My boots stayed rooted. There was no part of me still asking for permission. A staffer appeared beside me. "Admiral Hayes, you'll be introduced shortly. Would you prefer to walk from stage left or center aisle?" I turned toward the aisle, the very path my family had used minutes ago. "Center," I said. "I'll go where they can see me coming." The staffer hesitated, then nodded and disappeared. As the MC continued his introduction of the Hayes family, I stood behind the door, waiting. Not for the moment, but for the silence, because that was what would break first. And once it did, there would be no turning it back. Part 3. The name spoken aloud. The announcer's voice was smooth, practiced, heavy with reverence. Colonel Lucas Hayes has distinguished himself through service resilience and diplomacy. Today, we honor not only his accomplishments, but the values he represents: courage, discipline, and family legacy. The words struck like a muted drumbeat. Predictable, polished, a performance of public pride. I stood just beyond the double doors that led into the main auditorium posture, straight breath-controlled. I could hear the shift of bodies, the hush that fell over the room as Lucas took the stage. Cameras clicked. Applause rose. My family's applause. I didn't move. Not until I heard the pause. A long one. Longer than any natural transition. Before we continue, the MC said his voice-dipping fleet command has asked that we acknowledge another officer in attendance today. A figure whose contributions, while quieter, have shaped missions across 3 continents. My fingers curled slightly against my thigh. She is not listed in today's program, but not because she was overlooked. She was omitted. The room stilled. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rear Admiral Freya Hayes. The name dropped like a flare into still water. It didn't explode, it illuminated. I opened the door and stepped into the aisle. All eyes turned. There was a ripple, subtle but unmistakable. A delay in comprehension. Then, a recognition that moved through the rows like a breath held too long. My mother's head whipped around. Her hand dropped from her pearl necklace. My father's mouth parted slightly, eyes narrowing in disbelief. Lucas, still standing at the podium, tensed, then stepped back. He knew. He had known. I walked down the center aisle, slowly, each step measured, each glance a record of someone remembering that I existed. A few officers stood, then a few more. Some saluted. Others simply bowed their heads. I didn't look left or right. I didn't break pace. When I reached the base of the stage, the MC stepped aside. Lucas was still there. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, almost reluctantly, he took one step forward and extended a hand. "Welcome," he said, eyes locked on mine. "Welcome, Admiral Hayes." He said it clearly, no smile, no overperformance, just truth. A flicker passed across the audience, shock, correction, re-evaluation. The sister they thought was estranged, the officer they never claimed, the name they'd never said out loud. Until now. I took his hand, briefly, firmly, then turned to face the room. The applause started slowly, then grew, not wild, not exuberant, but respectful, weighty. Behind me, the giant projection screen shifted new footage, a montage of my deployments, storm extractions, high sea evacuations, blurred headlines of operations never publicly claimed. My face in uniform, my team, my record. It was the truth finally unhidden. The MC returned to the mic. In recognition of her service record, Rear Admiral Hayes is hereby awarded the Naval Cross for humanitarian operations, for leadership under fire, for service without recognition, and for the kind of quiet valor that sustains a fleet. He handed me the medal. I didn't blink. I didn't smile. But I felt it like an old wound finding air for the first time. When the formalities ended, I stepped aside. Lucas leaned in as I passed him. "You came," he whispered. I didn't respond. Not yet. The reception began in the courtyard, champagne flutes, small talk, camera flashes. I remained at the periphery where I preferred to be. Eventually, Lucas approached, no entourage, no agenda, just the brother I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. "I didn't know they left you off the list," he said quietly. "Didn't you?" I asked. He looked down. "I didn't add you either." There it was. Not an apology, but something real. "I didn't come for them," I said. He nodded. "I know." I watched our parents from across the courtyard. My mother looked like she wanted to melt into her seat. My father stared out toward the naval flag, as if it would give him permission to feel something. "They won't say it," Lucas murmured. "Not today, probably not ever." "I'm not here for what they say," I replied. "I'm here for what they can't take back." He glanced sideways. "That's new." "No," I said, stepping away. "That's earned." And I left him standing there in the sunlight, in the legacy he inherited, while I walked back into the shadow I'd rebuilt with my own hands. But this time, I wasn't invisible. I was undeniable. Part 4. They tried to erase me. I chose not to erase them. The reception spilled into the lower garden, where retired officers in creased suits mingled with fresh recruits, trying to look comfortable in their first medals. Laughter floated through the air, delicate and performative. Every conversation was tinged with caution, the kind reserved for rooms where someone has just said what wasn't meant to be said. I stood alone under a fig tree at the far edge of the courtyard, sipping water from a plain glass. I didn't need champagne. I already had clarity. My mother found me first. She moved like someone trying not to be noticed, chin lifted, pace steady, but shoulders tighter than I remembered. The last time she'd looked at me like this, I was 19, sitting at the breakfast table, after telling her I'd accepted the Navy commission. Back then, she'd blinked twice, set her coffee down, and said, "I hope you don't expect a parade." Now she came to a halt in front of me, eyes glancing toward the others nearby, checking if anyone was listening. "You could have told us you were coming," she said. Not a greeting, a correction. "I wasn't invited," I replied. She bristled. "That's not the point." "No," I said quietly. "It's exactly the point." She crossed her arms. "Freya, this was Lucas's day. You chose a dramatic time to make a statement." I turned fully to her, letting the silence stretch until she had to feel it. "I didn't come to make a statement," I said. "I came to stand in a place I earned. If that disturbs the narrative, maybe the narrative needed disturbing." She blinked. "You always think you're the wounded one." "No," I said. "I just stopped pretending I wasn't." Her mouth parted slightly, searching for footing, but none came. And before she could try again, my father joined her. He didn't speak right away, just looked at me as though seeing a stranger in a familiar coat. "You've changed," he said. "No," I answered. "You just stopped recognizing me." His jaw tensed. "We didn't know you chose not to know." The space between us was dense with all the things they'd said about me when I wasn't in the room. I didn't need to recite them. I didn't come to drag them across the past. I came to claim the present. "I'm not here to ruin your celebration," I added. "I'm here because no one ruins me anymore." For the first time, my father looked uncertain. My mother looked small. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. "I don't hate you," I said, not because they deserved it, but because I meant it. "But I won't shrink just to make you comfortable." Neither replied. That in itself was an answer. I turned to leave, but my brother was already standing a few feet behind them. Lucas didn't say anything, just held my gaze. I waited. Finally, he stepped forward and nodded toward the exit. "Walk with me." We crossed the edge of the courtyard in silence, the path crunching beneath our boots. "She asked me to leave you off the list," he said quietly. I didn't ask who she was. I didn't need to. She said it would cause confusion, that it would make people ask questions. "And you?" I asked. I let her. That silence wasn't empty, it was heavy. "I'm not proud of it," he said. I looked ahead. "Neither am I." We stopped at the base of a flagpole. The sun had started to shift gold, softening the sharpness of noon. "I didn't come for them," I said again. "And I didn't come to be forgiven or thanked. I came because I'm done hiding from the story they kept trying to rewrite." Lucas exhaled. "You could have stayed invisible." I turned to him. "I could have, but then you'd be standing here alone." He looked at me, really looked. Like maybe for the first time in years, he saw me not as an absence, but as someone complete. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I'm glad I came for myself," I replied. Then I walked away. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need to prove anything else. I had already arrived. Part 5. The Family I Built Without Permission. 2 days later, I was back at base. The fog along the docks hadn't lifted yet, but the recruits were already lined up on the sand, calling cadence through the mist. Their voices were raw, some still learning when to lead, when to listen. From the observation deck, I watched them move. Not perfect, not in sync, but trying. Behind me, the command room was still humming. A young lieutenant jogged past, saluted, then whispered, "Ma'am, the team said your brother was on the news last night. He mentioned you." I nodded, but didn't ask what he said. I didn't need his words to verify my presence anymore. Later that afternoon, I stood in front of my unit, a mix of seasoned officers and first-year cadets. We were preparing for a joint deployment simulation. Before we began, one of the youngest, a quiet girl with calloused hands, raised her voice unexpectedly. "Ma'am, when you walked into that auditorium, how did you stay calm?" I let the question hang. Then I said, "Because no one in that room had the power to make me disappear. Not unless I handed it to them." A few heads lowered. One or two smiled. We began the briefing. On the table was a map of the Pacific covered in notes and highlighted routes. I pointed to one red line, an old extraction path I'd used during an operation no one ever gave us medals for. "You don't wait for permission to act with purpose," I said, "and you don't wait for applause to be real." That evening, I stayed late in the war room. On my desk was a photo someone had left anonymously, me at 10 years old, holding my first model ship, face full of fire. On the back, in new handwriting, were 6 words: "Thanks for walking back into frame." No signature. I didn't need one. Conclusion: the ceremony faded into headlines, then silence. My name appeared in a few press releases tucked between accolades for my brother. Most wouldn't notice, but I did. Weeks later, a letter arrived, handwritten, crisp, deliberate. Not from my parents. From Lucas. Inside was a photo of his daughter in a junior cadet uniform, clumsy salute and all. Beneath it, just one line. "If she earns it, I want her to know who her aunt is." I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the other things. I keep my grandfather's compass, my first field journal, and the mission badge I wore in Beirut. I didn't reply. Not in writing. Instead, I mailed his daughter a package. Inside was a copy of my old training manual, a compass, and a note that read, "You don't have to shine like them. Just learn how to find your way." Some families name you once and forget the rest. Others try to bury your name under theirs. But I stood in full uniform before every version of silence they'd ever handed me, and I answered with presence. They left me off the list. He said my name anyway, and that in the end was enough. Not because it changed them, but because it reminded me I had never truly vanished. I had only been waiting for the moment they couldn't ignore the echo.